All right. Welcome, everyone. I don't want to say the show because it's not really a show, but the conversation between myself and Donna Weber, author of the best-selling book, Onboarding Matters. Donna, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome, Antoine. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to have this conversation. I know you're super busy. You've got a million things going on with the book and in your business that we're going to get into. Um, But first, let me just give a brief intro of what I know about you. And then I'll give you an opportunity to sort of fill in any blanks so people watching get a sense of, who you are and all the wonderful things that you're working on. For context sake, you are the person that I know the least about in my interview series. So far I've done about 10 or so interviews, mostly of people that I've already known professionally, either worked with or worked closely with. But you, although we haven't worked together, your sort of reputation precedes you, and I have heard of you, online and obviously from people that I've worked with, like Roger Jefferson, who was someone that I interviewed recently. He even mentioned, hey, you should talk to Donna Weber because she's fantastic. So I know that obviously, again, you're an author, you do public speaking, you're sort of recognized as like a thought leader, and you've spent quite a bit of time in your professional career as far as enablement, right, in general, and in customer success, post-sales sort of world. And obviously your book focuses specifically on sort of the onboarding phase of the customer life cycle. So let me just pause there. Is there anything else about you that you want to add that can help people sort of, again, understand who you are?
Sure. Well, I have my own business and I help high growth companies create customers for life. And really, it's all about helping the customers maximize value, because when customers win, then your company wins. It's that simple.
That's right. That's right. And it's funny you say customers for life. So I mentioned Roderick, and he and I used to work together at Salesforce. And that was the first time I heard customers for life, because we both worked in what was called the Customers for Life team at Salesforce. And I think they've renamed it since then. It's no longer called that. It's like Customer Experience Group or something. So I was just wondering, I think conceptually, the idea of creating customers that love you so much that they're willing to stick with you for life is a good thing, right? Regardless of, any particular company or product, or it's just in general, if you are, providing a service or a product, you want your customers to be happy and to want to continue to work with you long term, right? And that's the spirit of what you mean by that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah. And it's not just, oh, wouldn't it be nice if they stuck around? But in the world of subscription, the reality is that even though you acquire a new customer and, woohoo, we got a new customer, you ring the bell, you crack open the champagne. Yeah. The reality is you might get some money coming in, but you're not making money till you keep that customer because of customer acquisition costs. Right. And so that's the thing. And, I see a lot of SaaS companies still very focused on that new sale, the new logo, which is important. Sure. But if all of your customers are leaving through the back door within the first year, your company is losing money. And so that's why, they may not be there for life, but you've got to get them through that first year, ideally 2, 3, 4+ years, because then you get this compounding revenue. Right. And that's what makes SaaS and subscriptions so compelling. That's right. Is this compounding revenue. But because you might be losing, let's say, $1, it might cost you $1.50 for every new dollar you bring in. Right. So that first year it's costing you 50 cents for every new customer, but then it might cost you 10 cents on the dollar to keep them. And that's when your business really makes money.
That's right. So this is all really exciting stuff that I want to dig more into, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Okay. Let me take a step back, because part of, again, why I do these, again, I don't want to say interviews, I like to call them conversations. Part of why I do this is, again, to really understand the person and that I'm talking with, and specifically your sort of personal journey, from a career perspective, how you got to where you are now from where you were. And I like to explore things such as, again, your childhood and the influence your parents and maybe other mentors may have had, whether it be at school or in sports, the things that you were interested in from an academic standpoint, and then ultimately how you progressed in your professional career, getting to where you are now, and really getting to sort of the core of that. And the spirit of it is, there might be people that maybe have dreams and they want to achieve something and haven't been able to do it yet. And maybe by hearing your story, they can be inspired and take that next step that maybe they haven't been able to do so otherwise. So I'm a fan of Simon Sinek, and I've read Start With Why. It's a wonderful book. And I'm just curious, I just wanted to start there, whether you read the book or not. Why do you get out of bed in the morning, Donna? Like, what makes you tick?
Well, yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned Simon Sinek. I've seen his some talks of his, but I have not read the book, and I just wrote down, make sure I read it.
Right.
When I was a kid, I probably still, that was my favorite question, is why.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom gave me a book called The Big Book of Answers, because I was always asking why.
Yeah.
And so that is my favorite question.
Yeah.
And well, what gets me out of the bed in the morning is I just love to learn. I have a passion for learning.
Yeah.
And I have so much fun with my own business because I work with companies in Hungary, in Israel, in the UK, in Finland, in all across the US, North America. So that's awesome to, get to connect with people from all over the world.
Right.
I work with companies that have like big data platforms, software for accountants, manufacturing software where their customers are building spacecraft, literally, to learning technology. I mean, it's fascinating. And I often get to interview the customers of my clients. And so I just have so much fun. I'm constantly learning. Plus, I get to learn how to run a business, and
Right.
customer success is this, very active community. So I love learning. And the fact that I get to do that every day is thrilling for me.
I love that. Love that. And I'm with you there as well. That's definitely one of the reasons why I get out of bed too, is to try to learn something new every day. So talk to me a little bit more about your childhood. Again, the reason why I'm curious is because, I'm always fascinated with psychology and why people do and say the things that they do. And we know that our childhood, especially the early years, has a significant impact on who sort of we grow up to be and the things we end up doing. So can you just tell us, everybody, about, where you were born and raised and sort of your upbringing, maybe anything you wanted to share there that was interesting?
Sure. Well, before we started recording, you shared that you're from Brooklyn, right? And my dad was from Brooklyn.
Okay.
So I just wanted to share that connection. But so I live in Palo Alto, California, but I grew up not far from here in San Jose.
Okay.
And I'm one of four girls. I'm the third of four, number 3, lower middle. Close family. But I was growing up in Silicon Valley as Silicon Valley was happening. I mean, HP was down the road. Apple was, I think in my high school, we had some of the first Apple computers.
Right.
So that was all around. And I loved reading. I was a total bookworm. And also I loved, I was in the San Jose Children's Musical Theater. I wanted to be a performer, but I also liked science. And I never really moved forward on being a performer, but I used to deliver training, and I get to speak a lot. So I enjoy that those parts of me get to be fulfilled in my career.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. So were your family, when did you know what you wanted to do, and was your family supportive?
Well, I mean, the thing is, when you think of it, Antoine, who says they want to grow up and be a head of customer success or an implementation manager, so I wanted to be on Broadway and a scientist.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, so I don't know if I ever said this is what I want to be when I grow up, but I liked science and math and stuff. In university, I started doing engineering, but it wasn't as exciting to me. And I ended up after changing my major a few times, I ended up with history. And I think history is really fascinating because there's a lot of that why, and it's I see myself, I think like a historian is really looking at trends, you're analyzing trends. And that's something I like to see, when I'm working with companies, I'm looking at like what's happening, what are the trends, what are the relationships, where have things been, where do we need to go, seeing patterns, I think. So I think, even though you might think a history degree, what does that have to do with tech? But I do think that there's a lot of that kind of understanding the big picture and how things, relate.
Right. Yeah. So that's fascinating. You're right. I certainly didn't know what I wanted to be, or I didn't know that at a young age that I'd end up being in customer success. And probably if you had asked my parents, they probably didn't think I was going to amount to much of anything, actually. So I'm glad to pleasantly have surprised them. But I do think that there's probably certain core values or qualities that, most humans, obviously ourselves included, that were already there, sort of innate in us, and that the careers we chose sort of are aligned. So I'll explain what I mean by that. Oftentimes, as a hiring manager, I've been asked, what are the qualities you look for in customer success managers or customer success members? And, things like empathy, compassion, and just the spirit of wanting to help a customer sort of solve problems because those problems are causing pain. So those are just a couple of examples of why I think I ended up being in customer success, because I do gain satisfaction from knowing I'm helping customers solve problems. So would you say that maybe that might have been the case with you as well? Perhaps maybe there was some similar sort of values that you held within you that you were able to fulfill through this career choice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I was in high school, I probably took one of these aptitude tests and it came up as social worker. And I'm like, social worker?
Yeah.
It just seemed, what? But so I'm actually on my third career now. My first career out of college, I was, I did a year of my degree in Scotland at Stirling University. And then I ended up staying in the UK for 10 years. And so my first career was working with natural therapies in the UK. I had my own practice there and, but totally empathy, compassion, wanting to help. And, probably about I did that for 8 years, but probably like 5-7 years in, I'm like, oh, this is kind of like being a natural therapy focused social worker.
Yeah, right.
So, and then when I was, so I had that practice and then I started delivering courses and then developing my own courses. And what I realized that what really got me excited and turned me on was that course development and delivery. So when I moved back to California, after living in the UK for 10 years, I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to do like personal growth kind of training. And because I'm from Silicon Valley, my first job back in the US was at Netscape, which was the hot tech company at that time. And then that was when Microsoft started giving away their browser. So for folks who don't know, Netscape was like one of the first browsers.
That's right.
You can imagine life without a browser. And then and they charged for the browser. And then Microsoft started giving away their browser and I got laid off. And so I was like, well, I realized like, wow, doing this kind of personal development stuff, you're just gonna, I'm like, I don't want to get laid off. And so then I realized it's tech training. That's like where the stability is, because no matter what, your product is constantly changing. So then I dove into customer education and technology training. And and worked at a few companies doing that. And some were internal focus, technology training, but training employees. But, that fulfilled a lot of my values of constantly learning, because the technology is constantly changing. So you get to just keep learning. Part of I'm getting paid to learn.
Right.
And then working with people and being like that bridge between the technology and the people. And when I was doing the natural therapies, I loved that, but there was a part of my brain that was like hungry to be. I really enjoy technology, so I was missing that. I was wanting that kind of more challenge technology, challenge with technology. So then I saw myself as the bridge between the technology and the user. So because I'm a people person, but I enjoy technology. So then I spent several years launching customer education, customer enablement programs from scratch at startups, and realized how much I love the beginning. I love the build, defining and building and launching. I love that. And realizing that once I finally got things running smoothly at companies, I would then, and then you're into this maintenance and administrative mode, then I would lose interest. So I learned when I worked at Siebel Systems, which is how I know Roderick. We did like a team, personality kind of analysis, and mine came back builder promoter, and it really helped me realize like that's what I love. That's what keeps me in my keeps me energized. And so when I was working at Jaspersoft, which is the last full-time company I worked at, it's an analytics company. I built the customer education from scratch there. And then we had this need for the customers, which I'll go into a bit more. But I just started thinking like, well, maybe I could kind of start acting like a consultant internally, because one day I'd like to be a consultant, because I just love like the new, because I started thinking maybe I need to be a consultant. Yeah. So that's where I started thinking, that just really knowing I love the beginning. I love the new. I love the learning. I love building. And so getting to like stay in those core values of mine.
Okay, beautiful. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I want to dig into that. But again, let me just take a step back. There's a couple of other areas I wanted to touch upon. Prior to your professional career, we talked a little about your upbringing in Palo Alto. Just out of curiosity, any sports, either team or individual sports as a young adult growing up?
As a kid, I was not active. I was a total bookworm. I would literally walk to school with a book in front of my face. I'd be like walking and reading like this.
I've seen that.
And I'd come home from school and read. And so I was a total bookworm, goody, straight A student. And then in high school, I played field hockey and did a little bit of cross country. And then in college, I was on the rowing team. And so I started getting more active. And then as I became more and more of an adult, I became much more athletic. And now like people see me as an athlete. And so I love to do things like kayaking and hiking and cycling and working out. I pretty much work out every day.
Okay, good. Well, the reason I asked is two reasons. Obviously, I think in order to be peak performance, we look at three areas. There's physical, mental, and then there's spiritual. So I was just curious, again, everybody has a different sort of regimen or whatever helps them be at their best. And it sounds like you've incorporated fitness. The other reason why I brought it up is because I've often seen parallels, especially in team sports, that skills that as young adults that we would gain through that experience as we grow up, and then we move into working professionally. It's sort of a team, isn't it? Working in an office, in a company with others. So do you see any parallels there? Do you remember any experiences that you think helped you? Or
well, I would say like because I didn't feel like I grew up with team sports. Like I didn't play soccer or softball, but most of my friends were. I do whitewater kayaking. I learned how to do that in England when I lived there. But I feel like the whitewater kayaking really gives me a lot of analogies for
Uh-huh.
life, you
Okay.
know?
Okay. And when you said you played field hockey and then you did some row, those are team
Yeah.
sports though.
Yeah.
You enjoyed that? That was a good
Yeah. Yeah,
experience?
absolutely. I don't feel like those really shaped me. I mean, rowing is very challenging. And,
Right, right,
you know, the fact that you have to be in absolute sync with your
right.
boat mates, with your crew. I mean, you
Yeah,
can't be off,
that's
otherwise
right.
everyone suffers. So
That's right.
yeah.
Teamwork, right? One of the
Yeah.
perfect examples of teamwork, because not just rowing, but it's rowing in sync with everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah. So I was in it. I was the bow person in an 8.
Okay, okay. And rowing is personally not something I was ever exposed to growing up in New York, certainly not in Brooklyn. And frankly, I didn't even ever learn how to swim because there's no pools in New York, at least not back when I lived there, or bodies of water that you would want to swim in safely. But interesting. So when you talk about the rowing and being in sync, one of the things that I like to focus on within organizations is organizational health and organizational alignment. So the analogy I guess I'm just making in my head, never having rowed or knowing much about it, but the fact that you said you have to row in sync with your teammates, I can make an analogy and say, you know, how many members on a row team? 5, 6?
It's 8. Well, it depends. There's an 8, a boat with 8, and there's a boat with 4. There's a boat with 2, or you
So
can
imagine
scull
if
with 1.
each team member was a different function within your organization. And what
Yeah.
I found in my personal experience, as well as books that I've read about the companies that excel and do better, you have that sort of organizational health and alignment where everybody's rowing together at the same time, as opposed to doing things separately, and caring more about sort of their personal sort of team or performance, as opposed to the greater good.
Well, that's why I call it my framework, orchestrated onboarding, and I go into it in my book. But it's all about, you know, I talk more, you know, I leverage the orchestra analogy here, but it's all about, you know, people being in tune, on the, you know, the customer facing side, being in harmony to work together for the performance for the customer, versus like, you know, often in some companies, the customer success manager is running around trying to pick up every instrument to play for the customer. You know, oh, I better log a support ticket. Oh, I better do some training now. Oh, I better, you know, I need to know enough to help implement the product. And like, there needs to be, and those customer facing teams are often very siloed and very focused on internal metrics like utilization rates, or how long does it take to implement, or how many support tickets are in the queue, or how many butts and seats for classes. And they're not talking about the customer. So that's part of my like passion, is to bring all those teams together to drive the customers to value.
Okay. So let's talk about the book, but first thing I wanted to understand, how do you get to the point where you figure out you want to write a book and then actually making it happen? Can you just sort of describe that process for people? Just really curious about how that was for you.
Well, it was more about starting with writing articles. And I took this class and read the book from Tara Moore. She has a class and a book called Playing Big, and I've taken the class several times. And it's really helps. It's for women, helping you to really show up in however playing big means for you. So it doesn't have to be like on this world stage, but I think she defines it as being more loyal to your dreams than your fears. So what I learned from Tara was that, you know, and I was always like rolling my eyes. Oh God, everyone's got a blog. I mean, nowadays everyone's got a podcast, right? And I was like, oh, I'm never going to do a blog. Everyone's writing blogs. Oh, brother. And also I read this book years ago, Milan Kundera. He was one of my favorite authors, where he was like saying, you know, in the future, everyone's going to be writing and no one's going to be reading, and it's just going to be words everywhere. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to like add to that. But she was like, you know, just start writing for yourself. And, you know, no one's going to read your blog when you first put it out there, right? Who's going to know it's even there? So just write for yourself. And then I also, when I launched my business, my colleague, Mike Gosby, I'm in an alliance of consultants, Kickstart Alliance. And Mike Gosby, the first time I met him, said, just write a little every day.
Yeah.
And so I started hearing things just to write. So I'm like, okay. And I did it for me. And the idea was that I don't even know what, when you start your own business, what do you got to like, learn about yourself.
Right.
So I just started writing to kind of hear, articulate thoughts in my head and, share observations. And I decided I would write a blog once a month, and that felt very attainable to me. And a lot of people, they're like, I'm going to write a blog every week. And then life happens. And then you don't hear from them for 3 months. And then all they do is apologize that they haven't been posting. Right.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, once a month, I can do that. That's achievable. And I just started writing. I took a few classes through UC Berkeley Extension on writing because I want to be a good writer. And so I just, plodded along. And then after probably about a year and a half, 2 years, I started realizing like I have this body of work and started building some thought leadership that, people are following me.
Okay.
So it takes time. It's not like you put a blog or two out there
Right.
and everyone's going to go, Antoine, you're the expert. It takes time and it takes consistency,
Yeah.
So, so I just started writing. And then there was a point where through my writing and also through observing customer success, I also met with my colleague, Francoise Tournier. She specializes in customer support. And the first thing she told me was niches is riches. So this is, again, just starting my business. So I was like, well, what's my niche? And I'd go to customer success events and I was like, oh my God, I don't do that. And I don't know what they're talking about. And I've never done that. So I felt like, oh, what do I do? And then I started realizing, well, what am I? So the writing helped me to understand what I'm passionate about, what I have a lot to say, and realizing where I could specialize. And then I realized these gaps around customer success teams are often very internally focused. People,
Right.
even though we talk about customer success, there's not a lot of talk about the customer. And people were never talking about customer enablement. Like they talk about partnering with sales and support and services. And I'm like, hello, customer education and enablement has been around for a long time and not getting, that. So I started to see where I could really have a voice and provide impact. Like, well, this is huge gap I see, and I have something to say here, and I can help people, help companies, help customers through what I do. And then that eventually led to, I think I have enough content to start pulling stuff together for a book.
Now, just out of curiosity, writing doesn't come naturally for me. I'm more of a verbal communicator, which is part of the reason why I do these recording conversations. Did writing come naturally for you, or was it?
I love writing. So, there was like, one day I want to be a writer. I'm going to be an author. And then I'm like, I am a writer. I write every day. I write in a journal every day. I have for years and years. When I need to process information, I mean, I'm here with my notebook and pen, like that is how I, you say something, I'm going to write it down.
Right, yeah.
I have to write things down. That's like how I process information. And even before I wrote this book, I was like, I am a writer. That is who I am. I write. And, I'm writing emails, I'm writing proposals, I'm writing reports. I am a writer. So even though I didn't have a book out, it helped me just to go, I am a writer. That is who I am.
Yeah. So I think that's great for you. I wish I could write. I think I'm capable of it. I'm just, it's laborious for me. And in your case, it sounds like not only you're able to write, but obviously your spoken verbal communication is excellent because you've done some keynotes and you do quite a bit of public speaking, don't you? And so can you just talk to me about that? Did that part come easy for you? Because like my wife, for example, she's fearful of public speaking. She wants nothing to do with it. And I know that's the case with some people. Sounds like writing was easy for you. What about public speaking?
Well, so I wouldn't say writing is easy, but I've learned, I read the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. I highly, highly recommend it. So he talks about really needing to create focus time so that we can go deep. And so that really helped me to set aside dedicated time. I don't do it every day, but most days to write, which it can be painful, but it allows me to go into that deep creative flow space. So writing doesn't come easy. And when I write regularly, I start to hear that voice. And then when I write then the voice comes in quickly.
Yeah.
But I mean, like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a performer. So I enjoy, I don't see myself doing that every day. I'm more of an introvert, so that wears me out. But I do enjoy speaking, and I do enjoy like articulating things clearly and explaining, being that bridge between like the technology and the user, between the concepts and the people. So I do enjoy that for sure.
Interesting. You said that you are an introvert. I never would have guessed.
I'm an extroverted introvert.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I've labeled myself, I think, an introvert, and I think you said something a second ago. I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but the public speaking perhaps is kind of taxing for you, or laborious, because I've said that.
Yeah, it's exhausting. Like,
yes.
So for example, before I started building customer enablement teams, I was an instructional designer, and I delivered courses now and then, which I enjoy. Some people, they would deliver a course, be up in front of people, and it just fills them with energy. And I was more like behind the scenes creating the course, but I love to get out now and then. But to do that every day would just drain me.
Well, I heard one definition of an introvert, and the difference between introvert and extrovert. Tell me if you've heard this. Introverts get their power from within. Extroverts get their power from external sources.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you heard that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I delivered a keynote last week in person, the first time in person, right, for 2 years. And it was like, oh my God, people are going to see what shoes I'm wearing. I haven't had that experience for so long. And I thoroughly enjoyed every minute. And I had to go lie down and close my eyes afterwards. I was exhausting.
I can relate. I can relate for sure. So talk to me a little bit more about the book. When I hear onboarding as a CS leader, I think of sort of the onboarding team or function with an organization that gets a customer up and running, so they can start to use what they bought, right? And the sooner you can get them to that point, the better, because the longer it takes, problems. But one thing that I learned from talking to you, or I want you to clarify for me, make sure I got it right, is the piece that you're focusing on here is the enablement piece, not so much the technical, or is it both?
Both, yeah. So most companies talk about onboarding, they equate it, it's a synonym with implementation.
Yeah, right.
And so I actually have an article, and I talk about it in the book as well, that onboarding does not equal implementation. In the world of software as a service, subscriptions, we need to like slow down and not just focus on deploying our product, but build this relationship with the customer. And my colleague Ed Powers enlightened me to the neuroscience of onboarding, which I go into detail in the book, which is how we need to build these trusting relationships that, the way our brains work is we dwell in fear and doubt because of prospection and rumination. And so you can't just sell to a new customer and go, woohoo, we're, and then we go to the kickoff and talk about all these technical details that overwhelms them. They end up with buyer's remorse. And I talk about the trough of disillusionment. So the beginning of the relationship is so critical. And I believe that that's when we win or lose the renewal. And so we need to really get that beginning of the relationship right. We know about first impressions personally, right? We know how important first impressions are. So those first impressions happen with the customers as well. And the reality is, even if we're dealing with a huge enterprise company, we're still dealing with people, no matter how technical your product is, we're still dealing with people. And I believe that in the world of B2B SaaS, we're missing that people component. So then the first stages of the orchestrated onboarding framework are all about building these relationships. So then, we're partners, we're on each other's side. And the reality is, I work with companies that have long and complex implementations, and guess what? Stuff's going to happen. That's not going to go well, right? And so if you have that relationship in place, then it's going to like lubricate, and you're going to be able to deal with all the crap that goes down The
Right.
data is not migrating, the APIs aren't connecting,
Right.
things aren't going live on time. But if you have a relationship, then everyone's going to be able to deal with that much
That's right.
more in a better way, and they're going to give you a lot more slack. Your customers
Mhm.
will
Mhm.
they'll be a lot more tolerant.
Yeah.
But if all you do is talk about the technology and don't, you and I take a moment to get to know each other, where you're from. Oh, we got some shared history, some shared passions. Now, like, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, versus if you just start firing
That's right.
questions at me, I might feel defensive. I might
That's right. Yeah.
feel, I don't like you. I might
Sure.
feel, uh, under attack. It's going to be a very different conversation.
Absolutely agree with you. 100%. Those relationships are so important, or getting beyond just the transactional. So there's two key sort of handoffs on the onboarding, during the onboarding phase. I was just wondering if you could touch upon one, the knowledge transfer from the pre-sales team to the onboarding team. And then if you could just touch upon that a bit for me. And then what about the transition to a CSM? When do you bring in a CSM? Is it before, during, or after onboarding? Anything you want to share there?
Sure. So first of all, the sales teams need to really help set the post-sales teams up for success. And the reality is that customers don't want to have to tell the same thing to, your teams over and over. That's the thing we hate the most. And companies often say, well, is it okay to have, more than one handoff? And I tell them, it doesn't matter how many handoffs you have, it's how you handle it.
Right.
So, for example, I was on the phone with a bank who shall not be named, and they transferred me 6 or 8, I think it was 8 times. Every time. Who is this? What's your name? What's your social security number? Why are you calling?
Yeah.
I was hysterical by the end. And I don't want to be a hysterical person. I was screaming at the poor person. I was so frustrated. And especially in this era when we have like technology, like seriously, guys.
Right.
So I was hysterical. I don't want to be that person, because like, really, you can't even tell the person who's calling and why. And, it made me want to leave the bank. And if they handled that where, you answer the phone, Antoine answers as, hi, Donna Weber, I understand this is your issue. You've been escalated to me because I'm the expert who can deal with your issue.
Yeah.
I feel great.
Right.
I feel looked after. I feel heard and seen, and like I'm in good hands. So we really need to do that for the customers. We can't just throw the sale over the fence. And
Right.
it's not just about what they bought and why. And ideally, if you're in a high touch type of engagement, the sales rep can convey important relationship stuff, like, Antoine's, really cerebral. So make sure you kind of, relate to him in that, or he likes to know all the details. He wants to understand the technology. Or versus, Antoine's very emotional. You need to like connect with him on an emotional level, or else you're never going to get his trust. If it's a long sales cycle, the sales reps they're masters at building trust, right? So they're the trusted partner. They need to pass that relationship over to the customer and share. Antoine's got 3 kids at home, and you're going to have to like, he can meet with you for like 15 minutes at a time. He's completely overwhelmed. And versus, he doesn't understand technology. You're going to have to spend a lot more time than our average customer, so then now, like, I can go in there with a way to relate and engage and partner with you, and you're setting me up for success.
Yep. And absolutely agree that it is quite frustrating when you're having to sort of repeat yourself, and you hope that information you've already shared has been shared with others, so they're prepared to have meaningful conversations sooner. And then on the CS side, CSMs, again, sort of the handoff, can you just talk to me about when you think the right time is to introduce a CSM? Is it before, during, or after onboarding?
Yeah, it really depends. So I don't like to have any hard and fast rules. However, if like I worked with a company that provides software and hardware for medical practices. And so what would happen is the deal would close, they bring in the implementation analyst, and then the customer was forever like focused on that implementation analyst, like, hey, Antoine, how's it going? I need your help. and they kept getting pulled into the accounts. And what we really want is those, you know, they brought me in to help reduce the onboarding and implementation time and cost by 20%.
Yeah.
So what we want is we want that implementation team kind of in and out, do the implementation and move out. So in that case, before I came in, they had the CSM engaged after the implementation. So we moved the CSM in actually right before the deal closed, so they can start building that trusted relationship, get the big picture. So I like to have the CSM engage earlier, understand what the success goals are, what's value mean, what are some quick wins, help them understand the journey ahead. And then they bring in the implementation team to now we're ready for the kickoff, which is all about, you know, milestones, deliverables, timelines, and technology requirements. And the CSM might engage a little throughout that. And then the implementation person hands off back to the CSM. And now the CSM is seen as that kind of the person that the people in the account attach to first, you know, and then they stay attached, and they're not trying to pull that implementation or onboarding person back in throughout the whole customer journey.
Love that. Donna, listen, I know we're almost out of time, but just last opportunity I wanted to give you. Is there anything that I didn't ask about that you wanted to share that you think is important or interesting or funny? Anything that you would want the world to know about Donna Weber?
Goodness, I don't know. Well, I love to learn, and I love to be outdoors. That's where, you know, I would say I get energized by being outdoors. And yeah, I look forward to connecting with you. That's
yeah. And again, I share the same with you. I love learning. Again, which is why I do these. I have these conversations with people because I love, I'm just fascinated again by people's journey, and you've certainly had quite a journey and some great accomplishments. So again, the book is Onboarding Matters. Thank you again, Donna, for taking the time to chat with me. I'll put a link in the description to the book on Amazon. Perfect 5-star reviews. Everybody loves it. Pick up a copy. Donna, it's been a tremendous pleasure. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoine.